Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have Michael Kummer here of michaelkummer.com. And we are talking about how to live an intermittent life, intermittent living, including intermittent fasting, but so much more. We're learning how to be a biohacking superstar, how to mimic living like our early ancestors. So, Michael, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it, Chantel.
So one thing that I love is that, when we were talking about intermittent fasting, you said, I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, but I'm also a big fan of intermittent living. So talk about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I just want to say that I didn't coin that term. Someone else did. There was a study actually, and I don't recall the researcher coming up with that, but or the group of researchers. But what I mean by that is really that we as a modern society very often fall into certain routines, because humans to a degree thrive on routines. We say that, even about babies, babies thrive on a routine, right? Same nap time, same, feeding time, etc. And I think we carry that into adulthood, and we tend to do the same things every day. We go to workout at 8, we might go into the sauna in the evening, we eat breakfast at a certain time, lunch, dinner, however many meals you have, if you don't intermittently fast, that is. And and I think that doesn't really reflect how humans have been living for however long you think we've been on this planet, right? I believe there is a certain randomness. Like sometimes we would find food, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we were exposed to the cold, sometimes we weren't. Sometimes we had to exert ourselves in, the hunt of an animal or running away from a saber-toothed tiger. And sometimes we could just walk leisurely, in the search for our next shelter. The bottom line is, we didn't work out or exert ourselves every single day at 8 a.m. The only, I think, regularity there is we would, rise when the sun would rise and go to bed when there was no more light, at least before we figured out how to make fire and, have light beyond darkness. And I think that's a very powerful concept that if you can apply that, I think it'll provide you with significantly more benefits than doing the same things over and over and over, because the body obviously gets used to certain things, right? We adapt, and that's a good thing. But we might also plateau. Like you can plateau, exercising, where you're not going to get any stronger, faster, what have you. And the same applies with a lot of other things. I've gotten so used to intermittent fasting that it's not a challenge anymore. It's not a
Mm.
stressor for me anymore not to skip breakfast. In fact, I don't even right now I don't even know how I would eat 3 meals a day. Impossible, because I'm not hungry. I'm fine with 1 to 2. But then again, the stressor is gone, and it's supposed to be a hormetic stressor, like so many other things in life, exercise, sauna bathing or hot exposure, cold exposure, all of those things are supposed to be stressors to make us stronger and more resilient. But once they stop being a stressor, you're probably not gonna reap as many benefits as you would otherwise. I'm not saying there are zero benefits, but if you do, intermittent fasting every single day, I don't think it necessarily mimics what humans have done or had to do for a long, long time.
That's so good. So, explain for people who have not heard that term about a hormetic stressor and what hormetic stress is, and figuring out, the right amount of stress where your body is challenged, but you're not overly fatigued, and kind of finding that sweet spot of what that hormetic stress the zone is, kind of,
Right,
if you will. A
right,
lot of people haven't heard that term before. So just explain that.
right. Well, I think the simplest example is you go to the gym and you work out and you're sore, right? Because you broke down muscle tissue, you exerted yourself significantly, and so for the body that means, ooh, we need to be stronger to endure something like that again and perform better. We don't want to. The body is basically and automatically responding and adapting to any stressor. But exercise, in particular, or abstaining from food by saying, okay, there is something going on, and we need to be strong enough and resilient enough to endure that and not to cause us any harm in the long run. And so, in the case of exercise, the body builds, more muscle tissue, you know, in, increases the strength of joints and ligaments, all of the things that happen when you, let's say, do resistance training, for example. Obviously, if you overdo it and you get injured, then you're beyond where the body, you might also get some benefits out of that, but there are obviously many more downsides to, recovery and healing the injury. But if you just stress your body enough, you become better, more resilient, stronger, whatever the case might be. So you can do better in the future. And that's really something that humans, if we weren't able to adapt like that, we would not be around anymore, right? And that plays, or that happens in every scenario of our lives. If you abstain from food for a certain amount of time, your body starts making ketones, because in the absence of glucose as a source of carbohydrates, we need to switch fuel sources and we make ketones. If we work out, we get stronger, or we improve our endurance. If we jump into a cold lake frequently, we get used to that as well. We are both, I think, from a mental perspective, we deal with, or we become capable of dealing with our fight and flight response to kind of suppress it and stay calm in such a case. But also from a resilience perspective, we become better at operating in the cold. I've noticed this ever since I started cold plunging. Taking a cold shower is nothing. For someone who has never exposed themselves to the cold, jumping into a cold shower, like turning it on cold from the get-go, is like something they could never do. And now going into a cold shower is like, it's refreshing, but it doesn't freak me out anymore. And again, that applies to every area of life almost.
Did you know that you can get all 4 of the books that I wrote, Waste Away, Fasting to Freedom, One Meal into Tasting, and Freedom from Food? You can buy all 4 books and get the ebook for free. Go right now to chantelrayway.com, or you can go to Amazon. Also, I just wrote a brand new book called How to Delegate Everything But Sex. If you are stressed out and are tired of doing everything on your own, go check out Delegate Everything But Sex, and there's all kinds of freebies on the site. Let's talk about beef liver, because beef liver is one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet. It's packed with choline, copper, iron, potassium, selenium, and a massive amount of vitamin A, which I think a lot of people are deficient in vitamin A. But just talk about how powerful beef liver is and why it's so important that you're getting that beef liver in. And we'll talk about what we can do if you can't stand the taste of it. We have an alternative. So talk about that.
Yeah, I would say that animal-based sources of food in general are incredibly rich in nutrients. And the important part there is, and that applies certainly to organs and in particular liver, which is arguably the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, that the nutrients in those animal-based foods are very easily for human bodies to absorb and to use. It doesn't really matter how much of a micronutrient is in a given food. If the body cannot use it, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, you can have tons of iron, non-heme iron in spinach, but the body can't use it, or only a fraction of it, right? And so bioavailability and absorbability are really key with organs, with animal foods in general, but in particular with organs, because they are such concentrated sources of those vitamins and minerals and enzymes and peptides and all of those things. And if we look in nature, funny enough, if you look at a wolf pack hunting, when they kill another animal, they go for the organs first. That's what they eat first before eating the muscle meat, and that's because they know that they need those micronutrients. They also need, the macros, obviously, the fat, the protein, etc. But the micronutrients are incredibly important to have optimal levels. And most of us, as you already said, it's not only vitamin A. I mean, there are so many people deficient in B12, in iron, in many of the other micronutrients, and they suffer the consequences from that.
So I would say the 4 nutrients that I would say are the most important in beef liver, and you tell me, I would say it's copper, selenium, vitamin A, and maybe zinc are like the 4 biggest ones that I think people are really, really deficient in these days. What would you say are the main ones that beef liver provides for you?
Honestly, I don't have any research indicating what the micronutrients are that most people are deficient in. There are some that are, I think, easier to see or detect than others. Like, for example, if you're low in, B12, let's say, then you might also have low iron levels, low ferritin levels. There are certain, blood tests that are more, that more people get, and they, see the deficiency. I've yet anyone to, and it might be true that they are particularly deficient in that, but nobody ever came to me and said, "Hey, I'm deficient in selenium because of a blood test." I don't
Well,
think
and
anyone.
I'll tell you why I think that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll tell you why. Just because, like with selenium, if you think about how many people right now have thyroid issues,
Hmm.
right? Like if you look at how many people have thyroid issues now that didn't have it before,
Right.
and then I mean, there's study after study that shows selenium is absolutely crucial for your thyroid to work. So that's where
Right.
I'm kind of
Hmm.
making these different things. If you look at what diseases are on the rise, that's where I came up with kind of those
Yeah.
four. Make
No,
sense?
that makes absolutely sense. And the same goes, or very, related is, immunity. A lot of people have poor immune function, and, selenium also plays a major role in immune function, along with zinc and some of the others you mentioned. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely see that. Again, it's, I guess, an indirect clue that we are seeing. But I'm not sure if a lot of people realize, what's going on, and that they are deficient in, or that their poor immunity and their, poor thyroid function are because of nutritional deficiencies.
Mm. So it's funny that I was at kind of a biohacking lunch where it was like 10 of the biggest kind of names that you've ever heard of,
Hmm.
and everyone went around and everyone needed to say, like, this year, they said, okay, what did you implement this year? What would you say is the best thing that you've done for your health? And so one person would go and they would be like, cold plunge would be mine. And then the next person goes and he says, cold plunge. And
Hmm.
finally, everyone went around and everyone was like, cold plunge, cold plunge. And then finally they said, okay, what is the number one thing besides cold plunge? Right?
Hmm.
Because everyone said that. But I agree with it. I think that you can do too much of it. So talk about how, doing it intermittently is really what's best for your body.
Yeah, I think the main issue is that we are all exposed to probably more stress triggers than we should, or that's consistent with, human history. Back in the days, it was a saber-toothed tiger, or the absence of food, the lack of food that would stress us out. But now it's everything. Every minute of every day we get stressed by social media comments, a political discussion, whatever the case might be. And so I think we are overloaded with stressors, and if you then pile on hormetic stressors, it might be too much for you, or for certain individuals at least. And, in particular, I mentioned this in the past, if you're a menstruating female during certain phases of your cycle where you're maybe less robust to take on additional stressors, maybe during that time, it might not be, such a great idea to jump into the coldest cold plunge ever, and to jump into the sauna for 2 hours, and then, you start on a 4-day fast. So I think that's where you have to listen to your body and realistically assess your stress levels before you pile on more stressors. And for me, that means if I already feel like I'm redlining, I'm super stressed, maybe that's not the day, for fasting or for cold plunging or for sauna bathing, or maybe for sauna bathing, but on a lower temperature where I don't push myself to my limit. From a cardiovascular perspective, I just reap some of the benefits without, again, pushing myself so far that my capacity to handle stress overall from all of the sources combined gets overwhelmed. And so I think that's where the intermittent aspect can come in handy, where you kind of do it based on how you feel and what your body is capable of on a given day. There are some days where fasting is incredibly easy. I'm sure you've noticed that too. And some days where it really sucks. And you don't know exactly why. Now, that doesn't mean that every time something is difficult, you say, oh, I'm not going to do it because it's too challenging. But if there is a pattern, if you know your body really well, I would encourage you to take those cues into account and to structure your intermittent living, based on that.
Guys, I just want to interrupt for just a second, and I want you to hear Paul Saladino talk about why liver is so important. And if you don't like liver, we have another option for you.
Your ancestors were eating liver. And the reason that this sort of wisdom has been passed down is because liver is very nutritious. It's basically nature's multivitamin. If you look at the nutrients in meat, they're great. You've got zinc, you got B6, you got B12, you got some K2. But if you look at liver, it really complements what's in muscle meat. And there are many unique nutrients found in organs, specifically liver as a powerhouse of these, that are difficult to obtain outside of liver. Like meat and organs are like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. They're supposed to be eaten together. The easiest way to eat liver is just to do it raw. If you don't want to eat liver raw, you can cook it. But the reason that I like to do it raw is because there are unique nutrients in liver that are probably somewhat degraded when you cook the liver.
This really is like the most nutrient-rich supplements that you can find, and they are amazing. I have tried them. I absolutely love them. So just go to heartandsoil.co, use the coupon code, and save you some money there.
So one of the things that I saw on your website, and I want you to talk about, you said that pizza is obviously unhealthy for you, but you can make it healthier. And you kind of talk about that pizza was kind of your dietary Achilles heel. And
Yes.
so now you kind of have a bi-monthly pizza night at your house, but you've turned it into kind of a really healthy thing. So I want you to kind of describe what you do and explain exactly how you make it where it's healthier.
Right. Yeah. It's not really healthy, but it's definitely healthier. And well, what it basically means is that we make the pizza from scratch, and the dough we make sourdough. So it's double fermented sourdough using organic flour, which means the glycemic index is a little bit less. There are fewer glutens in there because the bacteria, in the sourdough consumes some of those gluten. So it makes it healthier. It mitigates some of the anti-nutrients in those grains, in the wheat, in the flour in particular. And we make everything from scratch. We use tomatoes, from our garden. The salami we don't make yet, and the cheese not either yet, even though next year we'll have dairy cows and we'll make the cheese ourselves too. But we, use as many ingredients from our own garden as we possibly can, and we make everything from scratch. And I think the key here is really the sourdough and the avoidance of seed oils to make that pizza healthier. Obviously, it's not something I would encourage you to eat every single day. But if, like in our case, we do it once every month, once every 2 months or so, we all metabolically healthy, it's not going to derail us. And we get to enjoy that whole process as a family, from the beginning from making it to enjoying it then.
Well, and I want to say this, we actually have 2 restaurants that are nearby, and I've tried to make sourdough a couple different times myself personally,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just turned out a disaster, honestly. It's just like so much work. We spent like 14 days, feeding this thing, and
Yeah.
it just was horrible. So finally, we found 2 restaurants. One that's like an Italian restaurant that kind of makes their dough from scratch every
Mm-hmm.
day, and they import from Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another place that makes organic breads. And so you can buy, like, if you go and buy their flour, because that to me is the hardest thing. And then you can get like, an organic or a raw cheese and find some organic tomato sauce is easy. Finding raw cheese or finding, organic cheese is easy. To me, the hardest thing is trying to make that sourdough.
Yeah.
I have a house manager that's a wonderful cook, and we did it and it was okay. But I'm just saying the other places are so good. You might as well just buy it from there and then make it from home. And then you make sure you're not having, obviously the seed oils as well, because a lot of the places like Papa John's, they're using seed oils as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I do. Yeah.
They're using soybean oil and soybeans, which are highly inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so good. So what are some other kind of hacks like that where you can go, because people want to eat healthy, they want to live healthy, but they want to be able to every once in a while, have pizza or have this. What's another hack that you've done similar to that for your family that has made it a little bit better than traditional, but still feeding that craving that you have?
I think another good example and very easy example would be French fries. You can, if you buy organic potatoes, you peel them, you slice them, either, if you want to make chips or French fries, you slice them accordingly. And then you put them into a solution of saline solution, 2.5% saline solution, meaning that you weigh the potatoes, you put them into water, you weigh the water and the potatoes, and you take 2.5% of that, and that's the amount of salt you add into that mixture, and you let it stand there for 3 days, and it ferments. And that, again, reduces the glycemic index, converts some of the starches, and when you then fry those potatoes in an animal-based fat, like a tallow, for example, you get significantly fewer of those carcinogens that you would normally get when you combine high heat with starches. And at the same time, many of the anti-nutrients in potatoes are gone as well because of the fermentation. So you get French fries or chips or whatever you want to make out of those potatoes that are significantly healthier than if you were just, buy a bag of chips in the store, which are fried in seed oils, usually in vegetable oil. They might have the peel on, which is highly toxic, and they certainly weren't fermented, and you have a lot of those carcinogens, that get created as part of the frying process. And that's super simple. There is nothing you can screw up other than measurement, and they taste absolutely delicious.
Oh my gosh. So that is such a great hack, you guys. What a great idea for you to be able to have French fries. So give us that saline solution again of exactly how much water, how much salt, and for the 3 days. Talk about that again.
Yeah, so it's 2.5%. And that means you take whatever container you want to, ferment everything in, you put it on a scale, you zero it out, right? So you don't measure the weight of the container. You add the potatoes, you add the water, so they're covered in water, they should be submerged in water. And whatever you see on the scale, then that weight, let's see, it's, we typically do it in grams because it's easier. So let's say it's 2,000 grams. You take 2.5% of the 2,000, whatever that is, and that's the amount of salt you add into the water.
I don't know about you guys, but I am stressed. And if you're feeling overwhelmed this holiday season, then I get it. With all the family get-togethers, it is just a relentless source of stress. But anyway, there is something that I've got called Stress Guardian, and it's actually made by Bioptimizers, the people who make the magnesium breakthrough, which I love, love, love. But anyway, they are literally made this new product. It has 14 adaptogenic herbs, and it just regulates your stress. I just actually took some right this second, and it's awesome. If you go to stressguardian.com/wasteaway and put in waste away for 10% off your first order, it's stressguardian.com/wasteaway. Go there now.
Wow. That is such a great hack. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about saunas for a second and any other biohacks. So you just are kind of the biohack king, and you have so many different things that you've done that have really helped your health. Let's talk about, red light or sauna. Like if you had to, pick out of all of them, what would be kind of your favorite right now?
The sun. But ignoring the sun, I really like we have a sunlight and full spectrum infrared sauna that includes that has red light as well. And I really like that because it's relatively simple. I can, remotely turn it on, 45 minutes later, I can get in. I get the full spectrum of infrared radiation. That means near, mid, and far infrared. I get red light, and it gets hot enough to trigger a heat response, a heat stress, to release those heat shock proteins and all of those good things that come with sauna bathing and heat exposure in general. So that's the one I really like. But we have 3, 4, 5, 6 different saunas at home, and sometimes we go into the wet sauna, like traditional Finnish sauna. Sometimes we use the infrared. Sometimes I use a one-person sauna that we have in the family room. It's one from TheraSage where you can just sit in there. It goes until your neck. And you also get the full spectrum infrared, you get the red light, you get, the gemstones, you get the grounding mat, and it has, plays all the, has all the bells and whistles that you want. But for me, the best and most cost-effective way of exposing yourself to full spectrum light is sun. You know, every noon I go out, I take off my shirt, I take off my shoes, I sit on the grass and just sit there for 20 minutes. You get, you know, if you just pay attention to what you feel, like the grass on your skin, the heat of the sun on your skin, you know, the smells that may be around you, the noises that you hear, you get a meditative experience, you get your sun exposure, you get grounding, you get stress relief, you get so many things. And all you have to do is sit 20 minutes in the sun, you know? So that's really my favorite biohack by far, because it changes the way I feel, how I think. I can go back to the office. I'm full of energy. I'm relaxed. I'm not anxious anymore if I was anxious before. You know, I get a tan. I fix or I support my circadian rhythm. I sweat maybe, especially here in Georgia where it's super hot and humid in summer. So I get like my heat exposure as well. I get my grounding. There are so many things that are going on by just sitting 20 minutes in the backyard, you know, and listening to our chickens trying to find a worm.
Awesome. Let's talk about ozone therapy, because ozone therapy is kind of all the rage right now. And, you know, it's really been known. A lot of people are talking about how it can help with gut diseases, as far as irritable bowel syndrome and Lyme disease and some different autoimmune conditions. So I want you to talk about what exactly the different types of ozone therapy is. Like, what is ozone? What the different ozone therapies are, and how it actually works to help heal your body.
All right. Yeah, that's a loaded question. But ozone is a gas, right? You can smell it. It has a very distinctive smell, and it's very reactive. You know, it doesn't really last for very long. And that's one of the benefits of ozone therapy, because if you use ozone gas and you blow it on pathogens, it immediately disables those pathogens by reacting with them, you know, with the cell membranes of viruses, for example, or bacteria. And that's why it's used in, you know, in swimming pools, for example, to disinfect water, right? They use sometimes ozone, depending on where you go. Or, you know, in dental practices, you know, to disinfect, you know, when they have maybe procedures and stuff. And there are different ozone therapy modalities. There are systemic ones where, you know, you mentioned Lyme disease, or, you know, certain conditions that are more systemic. And there are certain ways to get that ozone into your body, either via IV or rectal or vaginal insufflation, it's called, right? So you basically put a tube up your butt or your vagina and you blow ozone gas into it, and it gets absorbed. It reacts immediately. And some of the metabolites called ozonides of that ozone gas are then the ones that cause your immune system to respond and to take care of business. So it's basically an immune system upregulator, if you will. And the same goes with IV. You know, if you don't obviously inject ozone gas directly into your veins, that would be stupid. But you can, you know, you can take some of your blood, you can expose it to ozone gas, and then re-inject that ozone blood basically back into your body. And again, it upregulates the immune system, but you can also use it locally. There are like ozone lotions that are suspended in olive oil, for example. There are ozone oil capsules that you can take that are also in a gel capsule with olive oil, and they can help you with gut issues. You know, if it's a topical issue, you know, you can use ozone oil to support the healing of a wound, or, you know, whatever the case might be. There's, you know, certain like wounds that don't heal very well, especially in the elderly, you know, population. And with ozone, they've had a lot of success getting those wounds to heal, you know? And so that's in a nutshell how ozone works. It upregulates your body's immune response, your body's acute inflammatory response, without necessarily upregulating any chronic inflammation, because that would be kind of productive.
Yeah, so basically you can actually, if I mean it's super advanced, but if you kind of got like an oxygen tank, right? Like if you bought an oxygen tank and then you got like an ozone generator, between the two, you could kind of give yourself like ozone treatments. You'd have to really work with someone to kind of
I would recommend you
dial that
work.
in.
Yeah, I would recommend you work with someone if that's what you want to do. I mean, there are certain modalities you can do at home, like the you know, vaginal insufflation or anal insufflation. You can do it home, but yes, you would need an ozone generator to make, you know, O3 out of O2, basically. You can do that. It's fairly safe. There is not a whole lot of things that can go wrong. Obviously, if you want to, go the IV route, I would recommend you work with a medical professional to not screw that up. But ozone oil, ozone capsules, those kind of things, you can just buy online and take them or use them yourself without any risk.
I love it. Well, this has been amazing. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Yeah, so michaelkummer.com, you mentioned initially, is my blog. That's my main outlet. I can also be found on YouTube and Instagram under Michael Kummer. We have a dedicated homesteading channel and Instagram as well, if you're into raising animals and food, and yeah, I'm on most social media outlets under my name, Michael Kummer. You can find me.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. You guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.